let's get right into it. We're going to travel back in time about 74,000 years to investigate what you might call a planetary scale crime scene. The big mystery? Whether one single colossal event pushed our species to the very edge of extinction. We have a prime suspect, and the evidence? Well, it's buried in millennia of rock, ice, and even inside our own DNA. So this is the central question we're digging into today. And it's a pretty terrifying thought, isn't it? Could one volcanic eruption, no matter how huge, bring the entire human population to its knees, leaving just a tiny handful of survivors to carry on our story? For decades, a lot of scientists thought the answer was a chilling, yep, it absolutely could have. So here's the clue that started this whole investigation. When geneticists look at our DNA, they see evidence that around 70,000 years ago, humanity went through a catastrophic population crash. The number of people left alive might have dropped to as low as 3,000 to 10,000. Just think about that. The entire human species could have fit into a small town. What on earth could have possibly caused something so drastic? Scientists have a name for this. It's called a genetic bottleneck. You can kind of picture it like shaking a bottle full of different colored marbles. Only a few of them manage to get out, and that dramatically reduces the variety for the next generation. This genetic clue pointed to a massive, sudden environmental crisis. And that's when everyone turned their attention to a geological giant. Okay, meet our prime suspect, the Toba supervolcano, located on the island of Sumatra in what's now Indonesia. About 74,000 years ago, Toba produced the largest explosive eruption our planet has seen in at least the last 28 million years. And it was, without a doubt, the largest in all of human history. So what even is a super-eruption? Well, it's the absolute maximum rating on the scientific scale, a VEI of 8. We're talking about an eruption that blasts out more than 1,000 cubic kilometers of material. But to really wrap your head around the power of Toba, we need to see it side by side with some others. This chart just lays it out perfectly. The 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, that felt catastrophic at the time. But look, you can barely even see its 1 cubic kilometer of ash on this chart. Then you've got Tambora in 1815, which was so big it caused the infamous year without a summer. But Toba is in a completely different league. It spat out around 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash. That's at least 17 times more than Tambora. It's just staggering. This thing was so violent that it blanketed all of South Asia with a 15-centimeter thick layer of ash. The fallout covered an area of at least 40 million square kilometers. And what's really incredible, scientists have now found microscopic traces of Toba's ash over 7,000 kilometers away at the bottom of Lake Malawi in Africa, right in the cradle of humanity. So, with the suspect this powerful, the theory was simple, it was elegant, and frankly, it was terrifying. You had the genetic bottleneck on one hand and this geological monster on the other. It seemed like a perfect match. So let's lay out the prosecution's case in what became known as the Toba catastrophe theory. The main weapon in this catastrophe would have been something called a volcanic winter. Basically, Toba would have just blasted enormous amounts of ash and sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, creating this veil that blocked sunlight from reaching the Earth. So the big question is, just how cold did it get? The early climate models, which were backed up by data from Greenland ice cores, pointed to a catastrophic global cooling of 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. And this wasn't just for a week or two. It lasted for years and might have even kicked off a cooling period that lasted 1,000 years. This would have just decimated plant life and wiped out the animals our ancestors needed for food. It perfectly explained that near extinction event we see in our genes. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. For decades, this was the leading theory for our species' closest brush with death. It was a really compelling story. But science is all about questioning things, and as researchers started looking closer at the actual evidence on the ground, the story began to unravel. So let's see how the defense team starts to build its case. The case against Toba seemed totally airtight. You had a powerful theory that linked this massive volcano to our genetic bottleneck, but as scientists literally started digging, new physical evidence popped up that began to challenge the entire story. And the first major piece of evidence against the catastrophe theory came from that same really unexpected place where they first found the ash, thousands of kilometers from the volcano, buried deep in the sediments at the bottom of Lake Malawi in East Africa. So scientists drilled deep into the lake bed and pulled up these long tubes of mud, which are basically like a history book for the local environment. They found that microscopic layer of Toba ash, no problem. But, and this is the crucial part, when they analyzed the layers of pollen and algae from right before, during, and after that ash layer, they saw no sign of a major climate collapse. The local ecosystem just kept on chugging along, pretty much undisturbed. The conclusion from the research team was an absolute bombshell for the catastrophe theory. I mean, it was unambiguous. Right there, in the very heart of where early modern humans were living, that devastating volcanic winter, it just didn't seem to have happened. And the evidence didn't stop in Africa. Even way closer to the blast, in India, archaeologists made another stunning discovery. They found stone tools from early humans, both directly below the Toba ash layer and directly above it. And the toolkits were almost identical, which suggests that the people who lived there actually survived the eruption and just kept on with their way of life. So if Toba didn't nearly kill us, what was its real impact? The evidence now suggests that while it wasn't a global species-ending apocalypse, it was still far from a minor event. And this brings us to the modern verdict on what Toba's true legacy really is. So the scientific consensus has really shifted. Toba didn't cause a near-extinction event. What it did cause was significant regional climate disruption. So instead of wiping our ancestors out, it might have actually presented them with a severe challenge that forced them to get creative and to innovate. For instance, one study in Ethiopia suggests that as rivers started to dry up from the arid conditions caused by the eruption, local humans shifted their diets and started eating more fish, which were suddenly easy to catch in these shrinking pools of water. Today, that massive caldera left by the eruption holds the beautiful, serene Lake Toba, the largest volcanic lake on Earth. And because of its incredible geological heritage and role in human history, it's been designated a UNESCO Global Geopark. But the story of the site isn't over. It now faces some very modern challenges. Yeah, in 2023, the geopark actually received a yellow card. That's a formal warning from UNESCO for failing to meet key management standards. And it really highlights a critical challenge. If we can't properly manage a dormant supervolcano site that tells a key story of our own past, how can we possibly prepare for the threats they might pose in our future? And this really brings us to our final lingering thought. Toba is dormant, not extinct, and it's just one of about 20 known supervolcanoes on Earth. The investigation into our past, into whether we nearly went extinct, has pretty much been closed, but it leaves us with a critical question for our future. We survived Toba, but are we truly prepared for the next big one?